After the divorce, I left the marriage penniless in order to fight for the custody of my son. My son laughed and said, "Don't you know that it was a scheme set up by my dad and me to force you to leave with nothing?" Later, when I was seriously ill in bed, he only cared about how much property I left him. After I died full of hatred, God gave me another chance. I unexpectedly returned to the time when I was getting divorced. "You bitch. You still want to take the child away. He's the root of our old Iago family." A fierce slap landed on my face with a pop. I lost my balance, feeling dizzy for a moment. And my husband's curses rang in my ears. But wasn't I already dead? I opened my eyes blankly and recognized that the person who had just slapped me was my ex-husband. "Iago, why did he look so young?" I glanced at the familiar mansion in front of me. My ex-husband with calculation written all over his face. And my mother-in-law who seemed to be trying to stop me but not really doing it. I immediately understood everything. I had traveled back 20 years. 20 years ago, I accompanied my husband to start from scratch, growing from an unknown small shop owner to the founder of a top-10 enterprise in the province. After our career stabilized, I gave birth to our son, Narcissus. And then, at my husband's request, I became a virtuous wife and no longer interfered in the company's affairs. Just when I thought life would go on smoothly like this forever, I accidentally learned an earth-shattering piece of news from Narcissus. My husband had an affair and he wanted to divorce me. For the sake of our son, Narcissus, I took the initiative to sign an agreement to leave the marriage penniless, not asking for a single cent of property from my ex-husband. But I didn't know that this would be the beginning of my suffering. Because I voluntarily gave up my property, my maternal family members were so angry that they cut off contact with me. I worked from dawn to dusk every day to earn money to support Narcissus. But Narcissus hated me more and more. He cursed at me. "It's all your fault. If you weren't old and haggard like a sow, would my dad abandon you? Then my dad wouldn't have a little brother. And all the property would be mine." He also said, "Hit me? You're still a fool even if you hit me. Don't you know that forcing you to leave with nothing was a play acted by my dad and me? Only a fool like you would fall for it." He taunted me. "The new aunt is young and beautiful. Why isn't she my mom? Even your man doesn't want you. What value do you have?" I was so angry that I hit him. He turned around and ran back to his dad's house. My former mother-in-law immediately called to scold me and even sent people to smash my door. They even made a scene at my maternal family's place, making the farce of my family known to everyone. Later, Narcissus became closer and closer to his dad, and I didn't bother to care. After sending him to college, he never came to see me again. In his WeChat moments, there were photos of him with the new aunt, and the family looked happy. Later, due to overwork when I was young, I was seriously ill when I got old. On my deathbed, he finally remembered me. As soon as Narcissus saw me, he asked me how much property I left him. When I asked him for a glass of water, he threw the water cup in my face. Looking at this stranger who had my blood flowing in his body, I only felt a chill in my heart. This was the son I gave birth to. Before I died, I made a wish. If I could start over, I would never make the wrong choice again. Right now, it was the scene of my divorce from my ex-husband back then. I was originally confronting him aggressively with the evidence of my husband's affair, wanting to take Narcissus away. But he slapped me. At this time, my ex-husband and my mother-in-law exchanged a look. The door of the room suddenly opened, and a little boy about 7 years old came running out crying, hugging my thigh. The boy had fair and tender skin, big and bright eyes filled with tears. It was my son, Narcissus. With Iago. Narcissus cried heartbreakably. I squatted down and tried to look at him calmly, saying, "Narcissus, why are you crying? Don't let mom go." "No, Narcissus wants to be with mom. Narcissus loves mom the most. Woo woo woo. Narcissus doesn't want a stepmom." He cried so heartbreakably that I just found it ridiculous. Because Narcissus had never loved me the most. He loved his rich dad, his grandma who indulged him in everything, and the aunt who let him eat endless snacks. Just not me. Seeing this, my mother-in-law quickly picked up Narcissus and said with deep distress, "You child, No matter how others treat you well, you only love your mom. You really are connected by blood. Iago glared at Narcissus angrily. No way. Narcissus can only stay in our family. He's the root of our old Iago family. Narcissus cried loudly. I want mom. I want mom. I watched them perform quietly. In my previous life, when I saw Narcissus crying so heartbreaking, my heart was almost broken. I said I didn't want anything. Just Narcissus. My former mother-in-law pretended to be on my side, and for the sake of the reunion of mother and son, she asked me to sign an agreement to leave the marriage penniless. Overwhelmed by motherly love, I didn't care about anything else. Later, I led a miserable life with nothing. My former mother-in-law and the mistress treated me like a joke, saying I was a brainless fool. I picked up the bag that had fallen on the ground and smoothed my disheveled hair. I asked Iago, you really won't let me take Narcissus away? Iago became energetic. I would rather die than let you take him away. I smiled and said, you're the one who had an affair. Yet you're so confident. Truly, a person can be invincible when they're shameless enough. Iago was furious. I don't care what you say. Narcissus is my bottom line. Narcissus cried and reached out his hand to me. Mom. Mom. I smiled and stroked Narcissus' face. Narcissus. Be good. Did you hear that? Your dad said you're his bottom line. So mom can rest assured. My mother-in-law was a bit flustered because I wasn't following her script at all. She said uneasily. Rest assured about what? Rest assured that Narcissus will live a good life with his dad. As you wish. I don't want this child anymore. I turned around and left. Narcissus was stunned. And his crying stopped immediately. His eyes were filled with a complexity that a child shouldn't have. And he blurted out in a panic. How can you not want me? You didn't choose this way before. I frowned and looked at Narcissus. What did he mean by that? Could he also have traveled back? I walked closer to Narcissus and looked into his eyes. Narcissus. What did you say just now? As I got closer and closer to Narcissus, he dodged my gaze and stepped back subconsciously, saying, and nothing. Iago and my mother-in-law were also frightened by my sharp gaze. I squatted down, stroked his head lovingly, and said in a voice that only the two of us could hear. Mom is just acting with them. How could I not want Narcissus? Narcissus's expression suddenly relaxed. And he stopped crying and smiled. I continued, but between mom and Aunt Shu, Narcissus will side with mom, right? Narcissus relaxed and smiled. Of course I'll side with mom. As soon as the words were out, Narcissus suddenly froze. I looked at him coldly. The Aunt Shu I mentioned was the wife Iago married later. She didn't appear until a year after Iago divorced me. She squeezed out all the other women and successfully took the position. And she was also the young and beautiful new mom in Narcissus's mouth. But the problem was, she hadn't appeared yet. Realizing that I was testing him, the tears that had been swirling in Narcissus's eyes disappeared, and instead, that familiar look appeared. Yes, it was the look he had when he splashed water on me at the bedside. Cold-blooded, selfish, and full of venom. Iago noticed that Narcissus was also at a loss at this time, and he raged impotently. If you want to leave, leave quickly. What are you forcing Narcissus for? I no longer thought this was a coincidence. I sneered. I slowly poured a glass of water from the table and handed it to Narcissus. I touched Narcissus's head and said, Narcissus. It's mom's fault. Mom really can't take you with me. If you have any grievances, let them out on mom. Pour this glass of water on mom's face. Hearing this, Narcissus trembled all over, dropped the glass, and it shattered on the ground. At this moment, time seemed to stand still. Finally, having fulfilled my anxiety, in his eyes, I saw the look he had at the bedside, wishing me dead. He had also traveled back with his memories. There was no mistake. I smiled knowingly and stood up, leaving a light sentence. Narcissus. Stay with your dad and grandma and live well. But I didn't expect Narcissus to lower his head and slowly pick up the broken glass on the ground, letting the glass cut his hands until they bled. He cried and picked up the broken glass and put it in the trash can, saying, Narcissus made Mom angry. Narcissus will be obedient and sensible from now on and won't cause Mom any trouble. Mom, don't abandon Narcissus. Seeing this, my mother-in-law rushed over and picked up Narcissus, saying, "How can you be so cruel as a mother? Are you trying to force the child to death?" Iago stood there stunned because everything that had happened until now was getting further and further away from his original plan. Just as I was about to reach the door, Narcissus's voice came from behind. He said faintly, "Mom, don't be angry. I'll be good and will definitely come back to you." I suddenly felt a chill running through me. I didn't look back but walked straight out of this disgusting place. As soon as I went out, I hailed a taxi and asked the driver to take me to the law firm. From now on, I have a lot of things to do. The first step is to make Iago, who is at fault for having an affair, leave the marriage penniless. The lawyer listened carefully to my situation and asked me how much evidence I had. I said I had photos, videos, and I could also get the hotel records of his affair. The lawyer told me to collect property certificates as much as possible. According to the situation I described, the other party was likely to transfer assets, so I should at least have an idea of his current property. I nodded. Just as I left the law firm, I suddenly received a call from my mom. She was crying and told me that Luna was dying. My heart skipped a beat. Luna was my sister. She died of cancer right around the time I was having a divorce with Iago. I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, my sister was on her last breath. She looked at her daughter, Hope, reluctantly. Hope was quietly and obediently staying by her mother's bedside. She said, "Mom doesn't hurt anymore. The pain has flown away. The pain has flown away." She didn't know that her mother was about to leave this world forever. My sister could no longer speak, but she refused to die. Her eyes were filled with tears, looking at each of us as if pleading. I immediately understood what she meant. I held her hand. "Luna, Abana, don't worry. I'll take good care of Hope for you. Sister will definitely raise her well." Luna's tears fell instantly. She nodded slightly and then fell into eternal sleep. In an instant, everyone in the room burst into sobs except Hope. Snow White Hope quietly leaned against her mother, as if feeling her mother's last breath. "Mom, it's time to go home. Mom." A tear slid down the child's cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, not wanting her mother to hear her sad voice. Hope must obediently send Mom home. I finally couldn't hold back and burst into tears. This scene reminded me of my previous life. Hope also comforted me like this by my sick bed. She was the only one who saw me off in my last moments. In fact, when Hope was very young, her parents divorced. Her biological father quickly remarried and had a child, completely ignoring her. After Luna died, Hope's biological father, out of a sense of moral obligation, reluctantly took Hope back home. Hope's stepmother disliked her and often beat and scolded her, while her biological father remained indifferent. Every time Hope came back to her grandparents' home, we could see scars all over her body. We negotiated with her father countless times. Her father would only say, "If you can't stand it, you can take her away. Anyway, I have a son now. My daughter is just a liability. I don't even want to raise her." At that time, I was already struggling to make ends meet with Narcissus. My parents were too old and had difficulty moving around themselves, let alone taking care of a child. So, I had to turn a blind eye and didn't fulfill my responsibility as an aunt. Later, Hope dropped out of school after finishing high school and was arranged by her father to get married and earn money to support her little brother's studies. Her life was thus ruined. But when I was in the hospital and no one cared about me, only she came on behalf of my family of origin. It was also her who took out all her savings from working to handle my funeral affairs as an irresponsible aunt. In my previous life, because I was arguing with Iago, I didn't even get to see my sister for the last time. In this life, I won't do such stupid things that make the enemy happy and the loved ones sad. Since I can't count on my own son, perhaps I still have a chance to change Hope's ruined life. After my sister passed away, I focused on handling her funeral affairs. I also contacted Hope's biological father to ask if he was willing to transfer Hope's guardianship to me. Hope's biological father readily agreed, as if getting rid of a hot potato, showing no sadness at all for my sister's death. Whether it's Iago or Hope's biological father, they are all a bunch of scumbags. At the morning hall, Hope kept staring at Luna's photo and asked me in a low voice, "Is Mom not in pain anymore?" I touched Hope's forehead and said with heartache, "Hope, be good. Mom will never feel pain again." Just as I was feeling sad, I suddenly saw Iago and my mother-in-law coming to the morning hall. Iago provoked, "The divorce hasn't been finalized yet. And you don't consider us family anymore? You didn't even tell me about such a big thing." I felt disgusted when I saw him and said impatiently, "My sister's funeral is kept simple. You don't need to get involved. If there's nothing else, you can go back." At this time, my mother-in-law also emerged from behind and said, "Oh, you may not know the rules, but the people of our Iago family can't ignore them. Can someone who doesn't even want her own son handle things well here? I think it's just a mess." I glared at my mother-in-law and said harshly, "It was your precious son who wanted to keep the root of your old Iago family. How is it that I don't want it? Aren't you afraid of divine retribution and an early death for slandering me in front of my sister's spiritual tablet at your age?" My mother-in-law was stunned. Before, I respected her as an elder and never spoke harshly to her. But why should I tolerate her now? Iago was completely enraged when he heard me talking about his mother in front of so many people. He raised his hand and rushed towards me. "Do I give you too much face? Without me and Narcissus, your sister won't even have anyone to carry the funeral banner tomorrow. And you won't be able to hold the funeral." My mother was already crying uncontrollably when she heard this. I suddenly understood. So, they were waiting for me here. They wanted Narcissus to take the lead as the only male in Luna's funeral, hoping I would change my mind and keep Narcissus. They were simply daydreaming. I blocked a slap with my left hand and raised my right hand to slap him in the face. I shouted loudly, "If you want to act drunk, get out of here. Let me tell you, from the moment I said divorce, our family's affairs don't need any help from your Iago family. Don't pretend to use Narcissus as an excuse here. And do you really think I have no one in my family?" At this time, my relatives surrounded me, worried that Iago would do something to me. Seeing that the plan had completely failed, Iago became cowardly and said viciously, "Fine, having fulfilled my sigh. You've become tough now. You're so arrogant. You said you wanted a divorce yourself. I want to see what kind of end you'll come to." I said calmly, "See you in court. Don't you dare not come." Iago turned to leave but was blocked by my cousin. My cousin is a retired soldier, tall and strong, and hates injustice. When he heard that Iago had an affair and hit me, he was so angry that he wanted to settle accounts with Iago. My mother managed to stop him with great difficulty. Iago was most afraid of him. And unexpectedly, he ran right into trouble. My cousin said coldly, "Don't leave. You dare to disrupt my cousin's funeral. You want to leave just like that? Brother-in-law, do you still remember what I told you when you married Persefino? I said if you dared to bully my sister, I would never let you go." Iago stepped back repeatedly and said, "What? What do you want to do? This is a society ruled by law. We'll call the police." My cousin said to me, "Persefino, you don't mind if I give him a good reception, do you?" I said, "I don't mind. But not here." I opened the door to the inner room for them and said, "It's quiet here." Iago was dragged in by my several cousins. Seeing this, my mother-in-law started screaming and cursing. I directly threw her out of the door. "Go home if you want to scream." Later, after my cousins gave Iago a good beating, they dragged him down and threw him into the trash can downstairs. Trash should be in the place where trash belongs. After burying my sister, I immediately adjusted my mood and fully immersed myself in the divorce lawsuit. Iago's face, Tygo's face, which had been beaten, was still swollen like a pig's head. He looked at me with venom in his eyes and said, "You won't win today. Don't waste your efforts." I said coldly, "Whether I win or lose is not up to you." When my lawyer presented my demands to the court, Iago quickly said, "I have no objection to her filing for divorce. But I don't agree with her demands." Because she had an affair behind my back. And I can't accept her using the child support that should be for our child to have a good time with other men. After that, several photos of me hugging and cuddling with other men at the dinner table were presented. As soon as these photos came out, the people below started pointing at me and saying, "This woman looks like a flirt. She's not a good person. I think the world has changed. Women turn bad when they have money." Seeing the photos, I was shocked for a moment. And anger completely welled up in my heart. At that time, in order to win a big order, Iago asked me to accompany the clients to dinner at night, because I was the one who had initially taken on this client. The company was just starting up and facing difficulties. For the sake of Iago and the young Narcissus, I endured the middle-aged clients' inappropriate touches and drank with them while Iago turned a blind eye to the client's lecherous behavior. I never expected that he secretly took pictures at some point and used these photos to turn the tables on me. Just then, run out a low sigh. Narcissus cried out, "Dad! Stop talking. No matter what Mom did wrong, Narcissus doesn't want to lose Mom." Iago slapped the table and stood up at this time, saying, "Look, did you think about Narcissus when you were doing these shameless things?" The judge looked at me and asked, "Plaintiff, do you have anything to explain?" Everyone's eyes turned to me. I held back my anger and said, "These photos were secretly taken by him when he asked me to accompany the clients to dinner. I endured humiliation and was harassed by those people, but I didn't expect he would secretly take these photos and say I had an affair." Iago retorted, "I asked you to talk about the order. I didn't ask you to talk about it in bed." The judge said to Iago at this time, "This is a court. Please pay attention to your words." I calmly took out a bunch of old mobile phones from my bag, opened one of them, and found a text message in it. The message clearly read what Iago said at that time: "Dear wife, for the sake of our family, please make a little sacrifice. At most they'll just touch you a bit. They won't do anything too excessive." I said to the judge, "This is the text message he sent me when he asked me to accompany the clients to dinner. I kept it. I won't say more." Iago didn't expect that I still kept the mobile phone from so many years ago. He thought that after I changed my mobile phone several times, those evidences had already been destroyed. He said in disbelief, How could you?" I looked at him and said, "Before, I just thought that keeping these bits and pieces would be memories of this family in the future. But I never thought these things would become evidence for you to hurt me again in court. I also never thought that so many years ago you had already started to guard against and scheme against me." My lawyer stood up and said, "You're slandering and defaming my client just based on a few pictures. Isn't this too disrespectful to the court?" Subsequently, Feltley, my lawyer, directly submitted our evidence to the judge. At this time, the three major pieces of irrefutable evidence of Iago's affair, chat screenshots, phone recordings, and indecent videos, were all made public. At the same time, a surveillance video was also released, which actually recorded the following scene. My mother-in-law said excitedly, "This lawsuit must not let that wasteful woman get any benefits." Then my mother-in-law touched Narcissus's head and said, "Have you remembered all the things Grandma told you?" Narcissus smiled and said, "I've remembered them all. Don't worry. I'll speak in favor of Dad at that time. If things go wrong, I'll cry." After this evidence was played, only my mother-in-law and Iago were left sitting there, their faces flushed. The judge looked at Iago and asked, "Defendant, do you have anything to explain regarding this?" At this moment, Iago stood up in a fit of rage, stuttering, It's not. These were secretly filmed by her illegally. They don't have any legal effect, right?" I immediately stood up and replied, "We're not divorced yet." I installed a surveillance camera in the corner of our living room and I casually looked at my husband's phone. "Are these actions illegal?" Iago was left speechless for a moment. Then, went out a low sigh. My mother-in-law behind me started shouting curses recklessly. "You ungrateful woman! You're playing dirty tricks." The judge glanced at the bailiff next to him, and the bailiff moved to take the mother-in-law out of the courtroom. The mother-in-law was still shouting loudly, "You've arrested the wrong person. Go arrest that whore. She tricked my son. Don't touch me. If you arrest me again, I'll call the police to arrest you." At this time, Two bailiffs came up and directly forced the mother-in-law out of the scene. One of the bailiffs suppressed a laugh and said, "Sure, the police station is on the left side across the road. Have a nice day and don't come back." After the lawyers on both sides had a confrontational exchange, the judge dropped the gavel that had been hanging in the air, and everything was settled. I got the property that I deserved, and Narcissus was awarded to Iago according to his own wishes. After the divorce lawsuit ended, I also became Hope's guardian. On the day when the adoption of Hope was finalized, I took her to the mall. She looked longingly at the rainbow-colored ice cream in the hands of other children. I wanted to buy one for her, but she stubbornly refused. I asked her why she didn't want it, and she said that it wasn't easy for me to earn money. "It's just a little money. It doesn't matter." Hope shook her head and said, "But it's still money that you earned with hard work." After Luna got sick, I heard that Hope gave all her lucky money to Luna. She even sold her beloved doll to her classmates to get money because she knew her mother needed it. She thought that the illness could be cured with money. Unfortunately, having fulfilled my obsession, it couldn't. Money couldn't save my sister. I touched Hope's head with pity. In my previous life, I also took Narcissus out to eat, but because I ordered the wrong flavor, Narcissus directly threw the ice cream at me. In contrast, Hope was so sensible. Or rather, she seemed so insecure. I was determined to work hard to earn money and live a good life with Hope. I wanted to reestablish a company. At that time, the company was founded by Iago and me together. Many of the old employees were handpicked and cultivated by me. Later, because I gave birth to Narcissus, I left the workplace. Iago not only violated the promised remuneration to the employees but also cut their salaries, exploited the old employees, and cultivated his own new people, forcing a group of people to leave. I opposed Iago's actions at that time. But because I had no real power, I was scolded by Iago to mind my own business. When they left their jobs, I invited each of them to a meal and said sorry to them one by one, saying that I was sorry for not fulfilling the promises I made at the beginning. I was determined to gamble with all the money in my hand. I believed I could start over. So I called them and invited them to start a business with me again. I thought I would be rejected, but unexpectedly, except for those who had already taken up new positions, they all agreed to me. "Sister Persefino, you've finally escaped from the abyss of suffering. Iago made you get pregnant and have a baby back then just to drive you out of the company. Sister Persefino, I was recruited by you in the first place. I'm on your side. Just because of the meal you treated me to when I left my job, I'll follow you. Sister Persefino, I didn't expect you to still remember me. Of course I'm willing to work with you. Isn't it just starting from scratch? Let's take down Iago." I was so moved that I almost cried. I didn't expect there were still people willing to follow me even though I had been away from the workplace for so many years. Our new company was established. On the day of its establishment, Iago called me. His tone on the phone was very disdainful. "I heard you've set up a new company recently and recruited all those useless people from before." I frowned and said, "What does it have to do with you?" Iago was angry. "Of course it does. The money you used to set up the company was the money I gave you in the divorce." I said coldly, "Get it straight. The company was founded by us. Without me, you would be nothing. I took the money that I deserved." Iago laughed. "Fine, hunting so wide sigh. Fine. I can't argue with you. I'm just reminding you. It's not the same era as before. What can a new company like yours use to compete with us? I think you'd better find an old man to marry while you still have some money. In a couple of years, no one will want you." A yellow-faced woman. I said calmly, "Whether I can succeed or not is not up to you to decide. I'm afraid you won't even be able to afford the alimony then." I hung up the phone. I sat in the office in silence for a long time. Iago had indeed hit my weak point. If I didn't start a business, the money would barely be enough for Hope and me to live on. But this time I chose to go all in and spend almost all my money. If the business failed, I would really have nothing. But I had been retreating for so many years. Every fear and hesitation had made me compromise step by step, and that's why I ended up in such a situation. Forget it. There's nothing more to lose. For Hope, for myself, And for all those who are willing to follow me, I can't back down. After the company was established, we actively contacted our old customers to expand our business. But strangely, when these old customers heard my voice, their attitudes were extremely cold, and they hung up the phone hastily one by one. Half a month passed. I went to visit customers with the employees every day but still got nothing. It was not until the third time I visited a customer that he finally relented. It turned out that Iago had called them in advance and told them not to cooperate with us. We've been cooperating for so many years. Don't you trust me? How can you give such an important order to a woman like her? We can lower the price. Can she? Besides, the people in her new company are all those who were fired from our place. Do you think those fired people have any professionalism? Under various offensive tactics, not a single customer was willing to cooperate with me. Looking at the daily financial losses, I fell into deep helplessness. Iago was secretly trying to trip me up. And Narcissus also called to mock me. He said, look, even if you start over, what can you do? You still can't accomplish anything. You can only do housework. I said, Narcissus, what exactly did I do to you that makes you hate me so much? In the previous life, I gave you whatever you wanted. I worked everywhere to support you. And this is the end result? Narcissus sneered. I hate your incompetence. What? If you weren't incompetent, my dad wouldn't have found a mistress. But look at you. You picked me up from Spoo every day dressed like an old woman. Your figure was out of shape. And you could only do housework. How could my dad not fall in love with someone else? I said faintly. Is this the reason why you followed your dad to frame me and force me to leave the marriage penniless in the previous life? Narcissus couldn't hide his proud look anymore. I didn't want to be with you in the first place. But my dad was right. Why should half of the money of our old Iago family be given to you? As long as I helped him act, all that money would be mine. Listening to these words, I just felt it was ironic. Narcissus continued. I finally waited until you died. Unexpectedly, I actually traveled back in time. Even if you got half of the property. So what? I thought you could achieve something in this life. But you're raising someone else's child and trying to run a company like others. Mom, I advise you to stop. You can't fight against my dad. You'd better give me that money now. When you die, I can buy you a coffin. I was so angry that I was shaking all over. Don't call me Mom. We'll cut off our mother-son relationship from now on. Even if I die, I won't give you that money. Narcissus said. Then you can just wait to lose all your money slowly. In the evening, I dragged my tired body home and found a strong smell of smoke in the house. I thought the house was on fire, but Hope was still inside. I shouted Hope's name loudly and desperately searched for her. I saw Hope come out of the kitchen with a plate of overcooked eggs. Her little face blackened. Hope said, looking aggrieved, I'm sorry, Auntie. I saw that you hadn't come back so late and thought you must not have eaten yet. I wanted to cook for you, but it turned out like this. It seems it can't be eaten. I was stunned. She was still a child herself. Yet she was thinking about whether I had eaten. It should be me cooking for her. The grievances at work and the mockery from Narcissus had made me physically and mentally exhausted. I had always told myself to be strong and held back my tears. At this moment, the accumulated emotions finally collapsed. I hugged Hope and burst into tears. All the grievances, pain, let out a low sigh, and disappointment had already left me in a mess. Hope comforted me in a flustered way. She gently patted my back and said, Auntie, don't cry. I'll do better next time. Don't be angry. I said with tears in my eyes. Auntie isn't angry. Auntie thinks Hope is amazing. Auntie is proud of Hope. That night, I ate up all the scrambled eggs Hope made. Hope looked at me worriedly. Auntie, you let out a low sigh. Don't eat it. I'm afraid you'll get sick. I shook my head and said, No, haven't fulfilled my obsession. Hope, it's really delicious. Have you eaten? Hope? Hope said. I ate at school. By the way, Auntie, can you give me some of those brochures from your company? We need to fold colored paper in our origami class. I smiled and gave her a stack of the company's brochures. Looking at this pile of brochures covered in dust, I thought that if the company couldn't continue, it might not be so bad. As long as there was a warm home, other things didn't seem so important. Unexpectedly, hadn't fulfilled Hope's eye. The next day, I received a call from Hope's teacher at the company. The person on the other end of the phone asked, "Are you Hope's parent?" My heart skipped a beat, fearing that something had happened to Hope at school. The voice on the other end of the phone continued, "Don't be nervous. I'm Hope's head teacher. Recently, Hope has been telling her classmates at school that your company is in trouble, and asking them to go home and tell their parents to see if they can help you." I felt embarrassed for a moment. Why would Hope tell her classmates these things? I quickly apologized. The kid was just joking around. "I'm sorry to trouble you, teacher." After school, I rushed to Hope's school. When Hope saw me, she ran towards me with a big smile. "Auntie." But I couldn't bring myself to smile. I stopped Hope and questioned her. "Hope, the teacher called me today. What have you been telling your classmates at school? Why are you meddling in adults' affairs?" Hope said anxiously. "No. It's not like that." I interrupted her. "No matter how difficult the company is, Auntie can still afford to raise you." Hope lowered her head in silence, not saying a word, but her eyes were filled with tears. Just then, a parent came over and patted me on the shoulder, asking, "You're Hope's parent, right? I received a gift from your child." I was puzzled. "Gift?" The parent then took out several paper cranes that Hope had folded with the brochures of my company. The parent said with a smile, "Your child is so sensible." She gave each classmate a paper crane. "She not only shares your worries but also has a good business sense." I just remembered that several foreign-funded enterprises will come to our city for bidding next month, and it's quite in line with your company's business. I don't know if it can help you. Hope raised her head, wiped away her tears, and bowed politely. "Thank you, Auntie. I'll give you a few more paper cranes." The parent was surprised. Oh, why are you crying?" For a moment, I thought back to when I first started my business. I was also giving out dolls one by one on the street, trying my best to talk to people, and finally got one order after another. After the parent left, Hope apologized to me. "I'm sorry, Auntie. I just didn't want to see you unhappy every day." I squatted down, touched Hope's head, and said, "I'm sorry, Hope. I shouldn't have snapped at you just now. It's just that I'm in a bad state. But starting from today, Auntie will definitely cheer up. I can't just let it go. I have to get through every difficulty." I refreshed myself and together with my employees, we started to make a new project plan and sort out bilingual documents. Although it was extremely difficult, the working atmosphere was intense and orderly, and everyone was full of enthusiasm. In 2 weeks, we made samples of the new product. The next month, with confidence, I led the team to the Fort Raid Fair. To my surprise, Iago was also there. After all, Iago's company is a leading enterprise in this industry. He made a lot of dazzling project plans and quickly got along well with the foreign clients. Iago came over with a sneer and greeted me. "Are you here to show me how badly you're going to lose?" I sneered back. "Winning or losing depends on one's ability. The outcome is still undetermined." Iago said, "I'm waiting to see the result." In terms of project plans and cases, we were clearly no match for Iago. He had spent a lot of money hiring people to make them. But foreigners don't just look at how beautiful your project plan is. When they asked some key questions about the product, the people Iago brought couldn't answer clearly and just stammered. Iago glared at them angrily while trying to smooth things over with a smile. Until I stepped onto the stage, Iago was waiting below, ready to laugh at me at any moment. Fortunately, we made our project plans by ourselves, and every one of my employees was quite familiar with the product. When the clients asked us key questions, we answered them with ease. More and more clients gathered around to listen to our product introduction. I said calmly, "Our project plans and PPTs are not very elaborate, but today I brought something." As I said this, I opened my palm. It was a paper crane as small as a fingernail. Iago laughed loudly. "What? Giving out freebies? And not even a big one?" Is this for kindergarten kids? Immediately, there was a burst of laughter from the audience. But at that moment, the paper crane flew up from my hand and slowly stopped in front of the foreign representative. The foreign representative exclaimed, "Amazing!" I smiled and said, "This is not a freebie. It's a sample of our company. I want to say that currently our company is the only one in the world that can achieve such fine craftsmanship." As soon as I finished speaking, thunderous applause rang out. Those for unfunded enterprises immediately abandoned Iago and came to talk to me about cooperation, surrounding me tightly. The old clients who had been poached by Iago before all left him and queued up to raise and orders with me. Iago was so angry that he cursed. "You're playing dirty again." I retorted, "You're so funny. I neither threat and nor lord anyone. People have sharp eyes. Empty talk is useless. Are you standing here to show me how badly you lost?" Iago turned around, cursing, and left. After that, my company's business got better and better, while Iago's company gradually declined. Because customers chose us. And our company's products and after-sales service received high praise, causing the orders that originally belonged to Iago to be withdrawn one after another. Due to the broken capital chain, Iago had to cut costs and use inferior products to pass off as good ones. He kept squeezing the old employees under him, making everyone complain. I, on the other hand, took out my savings to recruit talents, improved their treatment, and poached the elite talents from his company. Iago, who was walking on the edge, finally had a setback. A batch of defective products caused a big problem, and the customers refused to accept them. This batch of goods was produced with a 10 million yuan loan. Overnight, Iago was burned and with 10 million yuan debt, and his company ceased to exist. Later, I heard that Iago was constantly visited by creditors. In one conflict, he was beaten and his leg was broken. Since then, he even had trouble getting out of bed, no matter how Iago slandered and defamed us. In the end, people still judged by the products. Time passed. And before I knew it, many years had gone by. My life had changed a lot. More than I had ever imagined. My company grew bigger and bigger, long exceeding the scale of Iago's company back then. After experiencing my current life, I realized that I had wasted my past time. Even if I'm tired, I like the feeling of being in control of my life, rather than being someone's appendant and living in constant fear. Hope and I are as close as mother and daughter. She was successfully admitted to the best high school in the local area and has grown into a beautiful girl. As for Narcissus, I heard that because of his poor grades, he was sent to a vocational school after graduating from junior high school. In his previous life, his grades were also poor. Later, Iago spent a large sum of money to send him to an international high school. But this time, he had to accept the selection of society equally. No one would use money to open the back door for him anymore. His dream of being a rich second generation was completely shattered. On the weekend, I picked Hope up to go home for dinner. Hope, with a high ponytail, looked graceful and elegant. Hope took the things from my hands and said sensibly, "Auntie, you take a rest today. I'll cook fish for you." Just as we were walking to the door, talking and laughing, I saw a boy with long hair, squatting on the ground by the wall, smoking. I thought we had run into a hooligan, so I quickly protected Hope behind me and was about to call the police. But to my surprise, the boy threw the cigarette but on the ground, stamped on it hard, and stood up, shouting, "Mom!" I looked up in surprise, carefully identified him, and asked, "Narcissus?" Narcissus smiled at this time and walked over unsteadily. "I thought you didn't recognize me." I was shocked and said, "How did you become like this?" Narcissus laughed. "My dad is now paralyzed with a broken leg. His mistress ran away with a large sum of money. Naturally, I ended up like this." I questioned him. "Your dad is your dad. The money I gave you every month was enough for you to study and live well. What did you do with that money?" Narcissus said disapprovingly. "Actually, you don't need to give me money for my studies. Keep it for this top student in your family. I don't have a chance to study anymore." I said earnestly, "I can give you a sum of money for tutoring." You can still go to college from a vocational high school and choose your own life again. No matter what happened before, it's still not too late to start over. Narcissus got angry. Do you know what I hate the most? I hate it when people give me the money that's supposed to be mine and I still have to be grateful. I looked at him for a long time and sighed. Narcissus, don't you understand even now? Nothing is taken for granted, including the love of parents for their children. It can't be squandered at will. You treated me like that when I was taking care of you. Now I don't owe you anything. This money doesn't belong to you either. The moment I closed the door, Narcissus suddenly pointed at me viciously and shouted, "You don't let me come back just because you've recognized her as your daughter. Don't forget who your real child is." The moment the door was about to close, from Narcissus's hateful gaze, I suddenly had an ominous premonition. Not long after that incident, one morning, my phone was suddenly bombarded with calls. My company's secretary said in a hurry on the phone, "Chairman, quickly check the news. Our company downstairs is surrounded by reporters." At this time, I turned on my phone and obviously saw a hot search headline, "The sad crowdfunding of the son of the former chairman." The article was written by Narcissus. He poured out his grievances, saying that since his parents divorced, his mother had taken away all the property of the company and the family, causing his father to be in debt. Now his father is disabled and unable to take care of himself, and he himself dropped out of school early and worked everywhere to treat his father's illness. Now that his father is terminally ill, he has no choice but to beg for everyone's help. Soon, some influential local media interviewed Narcissus. Narcissus successfully won the public's sympathy with the tears he forced out in front of the camera. Then, when a flood of criticism came towards me, I opened the curtain and found that not only my company, but also my own doorstep was surrounded by reporters. I asked Hope to stay in the room obediently. I went out alone to explain to the media, but as soon as I reached the door, a bucket of red paint was splashed over. The blood-like red paint flowed down the gate. The person who splashed the paint turned around and ran away, but I recognized at a glance that it was Narcissus. How could I mistake my own son? I was about to call out to him, but the reporters' cameras and microphones were thrust towards me. "Please explain whether you have the behavior of abandoning your son. Is it true that your son said you used underhanded means to swindle the property of your ex-husband's company?" An aunt in the neighborhood looked at me with a face full of contempt and said, "Look at this woman. She has a face that brings bad luck to her husband. She's the type who would harm her own husband for her own interests." Another aunt chimed in, "You can never really know what's in a person's heart. You can't tell from their appearance. I never thought she would abandon her own son." At this moment, I calmed down and said to the camera, "Yes, Ed is indeed my son. I take responsibility for my son turning out like this. How will you handle this matter next? Do you think it will have an impact on your company's business?" The reporter kept asking questions relentlessly, shoving the microphone right in front of my face. I was blocked and couldn't get out. At this time, a figure stood in front of me. It was Hope. Hope protected me and stood in front of the camera, angrily saying, "If you feel sorry for him, then go and donate money to him. Don't stand here acting like a saint and morally kidnapping. I know exactly what kind of person my aunt is. Please stop publishing those false and distorted reports." This was the first time I saw Hope get angry. Once again, this child stood in front of me when I was helpless. After the crowd dispersed, I went to find Narcissus. Returning to that house after so many years, it had become dirty and messy. There was a photo of my mother-in-law hanging on the wall. Iago was lying in the bedroom full of garbage and excrement, so thin that he was just skin and bones. When Iago saw me, his breathing became rapid, but at this moment, he didn't even have the strength to speak. The once glamorous and successful Iago probably never thought he would end up in such a tragic situation. When Narcissus saw me, he spoke first. "Mom, you've finally come. I didn't expect you to be in a hurry," I said coldly. "Cut to the chase. What on earth do you want?" Narcissus said unhurriedly. "You don't think I only use despicable little tricks, do you?" I said angrily. "Aren't the tricks you're using despicable now?" Narcissus smiled and said, "Mom, I'm actually creating an opportunity for you. You can use this chance to let me return to the family, shift all the blame onto my dad, and then I'll help you exaggerate it a bit. You'll be seen as a glorious and good mother. And my dad will be the scumbag villain. This way, you can build an image. And I can return to your embrace. Isn't that good? At this point, Iago on the bed coughed violently several times, trying hard to say something but couldn't make a sound. I asked, I give you enough money every month to take care of your dad and for your schooling. How did you turn this home into such a mess? Narcissus glanced at Iago disapprovingly and said, he has no money and is in debt up to his neck. Why should I take care of this old geezer? What can the little money you gave do? How much do you give that jinx every month? I was so angry that I was trembling. You mean Hope? Hope never takes the pocket money I give her. She even works part-time to earn money to buy gifts for your grandma. Narcissus said viciously. Stop lying. Do you think I'm still a kid? Who asked about the monthly money? I'm talking about the company. The company. I want all the property I had before. I said coldly. I said before. The company is the company. And Hope is Hope. Narcissus sneered. Stop pretending. In short, you just don't want to give it to me. Well, if I can't have it, no one else can either. We'll all go down together. Looking at the messy house, the dying Iago on the bed, and the hateful look in Narcissus's eyes at this moment, my mood was extremely complicated. I turned to leave, but unexpectedly, Narcissus blocked my way. He was already a head taller than me now. He looked at me with an evil smile and said, leaving so soon? Leave the living expenses before you go. I've already given this month's. Then give the money for the next few months too. I looked at him and said, what if I don't? Narcissus laughed and said, my buddies are all around here. Do you think you can leave? I originally thought Narcissus was just bad but not stupid. Now it seems I was wrong. I said, do you think I came alone? Just then, my bodyguard called me to confirm my safety. He was waiting for me downstairs. Narcissus's eyes were cold and gloomy. Like a venomous snake, he stared at my departing back with reluctance. A few days later, I was going to represent the company to participate in the live recording of the 315 gala on the city TV station. Although the company's PR team and Hope repeatedly dissuaded me from participating. After all, I was in the spotlight at the moment. But I still decided to go resolutely. I had something I had to do. The whole gala went smoothly. And the company won the honor of an outstanding model enterprise. Just as I was about to go on stage to receive the award, Narcissus suddenly appeared. He held up a sign and knelt on the ground. The sign read Expose Fake. The cameras quickly focused on Narcissus. And the scene was broadcast live immediately. Narcissus cried with tears streaming down his face and said, today I came here to expose fakes. Because I'm my mom's real son. But my mom doesn't want me anymore. She's raising someone else's child. I just want to come here and ask my mom one question. Does she want her real son or the fake daughter? At this moment, all the eyes in the audience were focused on me. I said calmly, I've responded before. I take responsibility for my son turning out like this. I've made everyone laugh. But the truth is a bit different from what everyone thinks. I just happened to take this opportunity to tell everyone the truth. After that, I played the recording on my phone through the microphone. I turned on the recording as soon as I entered Narcissus's house that day. I didn't make it public before because when I saw the desolate situation in the house that day, I felt a bit reluctant. But today, Narcissus forced me to this point. After the recording was played, Narcissus blushed and lowered his head, facing the camera again. He became a bit incoherent. He blocked the camera with the sign and said, stop filming. Stop filming. Damn it. Then he fled the hall in a hurry. But what he didn't know was that the police at the door had been waiting for him. After that, Narcissus became completely famous in the city. He was arrested on charges such as causing trouble and spreading rumors. Although he was under 18 and given a lighter punishment, he still had to spend half a year in detention. Some of Iago's past affairs were dug up and fermented again. And with Narcissus being sent to jail. Learning about all this, Iago had a heart attack and passed away before he could be sent to the hospital. My life returned to peace. After going in, Narcissus seemed to have changed into a different person. He would always write me a letter every week, confessing all the things he had done before. There were also many tear stains on the letter paper. Looking at the dense words on the letter paper, in a trance, I felt that he might really have repented. So I wanted to wait and see if he would come to ask me for money after he came out. But half a year passed in a flash. After he came out, he only sent me a text message once to tell me he was out. After that, there were only some messages of greetings. And he didn't come to disturb my life. Recently, every time I went home, I found that the yard was very clean. I thought maybe Hope had secretly cleaned the yard again. After returning home, I called Hope over and said, "The exam is coming up soon. You should focus on your radio. Don't worry about the housework." Hope said awkwardly, "Auntie, I didn't do those chores." This made me a bit puzzled. So I installed a surveillance camera in the yard. After checking, I found out that it was Narcissus. Narcissus came every afternoon with his school bag on his back, cleaned the yard spotlessly, and then left. Hope said, "Auntie, Narcissus is your biological son after all. Do you really plan to ignore him forever?" Hope's words made me think. So the next day, I didn't go to work. Sure enough, in the afternoon, Narcissus appeared again. I found that he had cut his long hair and he became much more low-key and introverted. When he saw me, he smiled awkwardly. I sighed and asked, "Tell me, are you short of money again? How much do you need?" Unexpectedly, Narcissus quickly waved his hands and said, "No. No, no. I just feel that I've done a lot of things to hurt you before. And I want to make some compensation as much as I can. You don't need to give me money. I'm working part-time now. I was too naive before. I won't be like this anymore." I started to wonder in my heart. Has he really turned over a new leaf? Then Narcissus took out a report card from his school bag and showed it to me, saying, "I've started to study seriously. Although I still didn't pass this time. But what you said before was right. One should be responsible for their own life. I know I don't have the qualification to ask Mom for forgiveness yet. I hope I can get better in the future. And then I'll come to apologize to you formally." Looking at Narcissus's departing back, I actually felt a bit soft-hearted. As expected, a mother is like this, always willing to give her child a chance again and again. Well, I'll believe him this time. I invited Narcissus to a dinner at home. Sitting at the table, he seemed a bit nervous and was very polite, constantly giving way to Hope. After dinner, I called him to my side and talked to him. "Since you've realized your mistakes anew, and your dad is no longer here, if you want, you can come back and live with me." When Narcissus heard these words, tears welled up in his eyes, and he threw himself into my arms, constantly apologizing to me. I continued, "Hope has received a full scholarship from an overseas university. You're both grown up now. Because it involves the future of the company and your life plans, there are some things I want to talk to you about." Narcissus's eyes lit up at this moment and said, "Hope is so excellent. I also want to learn from her, study hard, and get an MBA in the future. Only then can I manage the company well and make Mom feel at ease." I shook my head and said, let out a low sigh. "When you grow up, I'll get old. After going through so many things, I'm tired. I sold all my shares in the company some time ago and plan to donate all the money to the Single Parent Family Foundation. This company will have nothing to do with us in the future. Narcissus, you have many choices in life. You don't have to be trapped by this company. Like Hope, go and see the bigger world through your own efforts." As soon as these words were spoken, Narcissus's face instantly froze, and he stood there motionless, stunned. It was not until I took out the documents for the resale of shares and showed them to him. Narcissus quickly took them and examined them carefully. A variety of expressions changed on his face, which was quite a spectacle. Hope said, "Auntie, I support your choice." I smiled and said to Narcissus, "Mom is a little thirsty. Can you pour me a glass of water?" Narcissus poured a glass of water with a sullen face. The next second the glass of water was splashed onto my face. Then he started to curse. "You old hag. Did you do this on purpose?" You're deliberately trying to screw me over. Right. Sure enough. Nothing had changed. I wiped the water off my face. At this point, I didn't even have the emotion of sadness. It seems I wasn't overthinking. I never thought this glass of water would eventually be splashed on my face. Narcissus's face was ferocious. And his whole body was trembling as he said, "All of this should have been mine. The company. The property. Everything should have been mine. I'll kill you right now. By blood inheritance. It should all be mine." After saying that, Narcissus picked up the fruit knife on the table and stabbed at me. Unexpectedly. At the critical moment. Hope blocked in front of me again. But with Hope's scream, the knife didn't pierce her chest. Instead, it broke. Everything happened so suddenly that Narcissus was also stunned. He didn't know that everything in this room that could potentially be used as a weapon had long been replaced by plastic and foam by me. And I had also arranged bodyguards in the room in advance. With a bang, the plastic knife fell to the ground, and Narcissus was immediately pinned to the ground by the bodyguards. Hope was still in shock. I immediately hugged Hope into my arms. I had thought of everything, but never expected that she would block in front of me. "You silly child. What if it was a real knife? You've been protecting me since I was a child. So I also want to protect you." Hearing these words, my heart began to ache. Because my own son had stabbed at me with a knife, while Hope had blocked this knife for me. I looked at Hope with heartache and said, "I promised your mother that I would take good care of you. Of course. I have to protect you." 2 lines of hot tears rolled down my face. The person connected to me by blood had tried to kill me with a knife. Hope and I only had a thin blood connection. But in both past and present lives, it was her who was by my side in the end. In fact, it wasn't me who saved her. From beginning to end, it was this child who had been saving me. Narcissus, knowing that there was no way out, completely lost his spirit. I took out the surveillance video from the room just now and directly called 110. Seeing that I was calling the police, Narcissus knelt on the ground like crazy and begged me. "Mom, having fulfilled my session. I was wrong. I'll count out of you. Don't call the police. Mom. I don't want anything anymore. I'll change. I really will change this time," I said coldly. "There's no going back since you stabbed that knife. The glass of water in the previous life woke me up, but in this life, I kept giving you chances. However, all I saw in you was disappointment. Now you should be responsible for your actions. We're no longer mother and son." The police took Narcissus away. This time, Narcissus would have to stay in prison for a longer time due to the crime of intentional injury. And I really sold the shares of the company and other properties. I left this place full of sadness with hope and moved to a city by the sea to start a new life. Everyone has the right not to reconcile with the past. Hope and I are the same. We don't plan to forgive. We choose to forget. The sea breeze was gentle. And Hope nestled in my arms. I'll tell you a secret." "What secret?" Hope smiled and said, "Actually, every time you're with me, I feel like my mom has never left me. I was really afraid of being abandoned, and before, when my mom just passed away, I always had nightmares at night, dreaming that I was living with my dad, being beaten and scolded, and having a really hard time. But fortunately, those were just dreams. After being with you, I never had those nightmares again." I gently tucked the stray hairs behind Hope's ears. Such a beautiful little girl would have a better future. Finally, having fulfilled Ray, I had changed Hope's tragic life in her previous life. If Luna could see this, she would surely rest in peace. Hope asked, "Could Mom be watching us at the end of the sea?" I nodded. "She must be. Maybe she's always been by our side." The end.